Bryan Harsin continues to remind us that the Auburn Tigers have quite a ways to go. And now I think we legitimately have to start asking ourselves if he's going to be there much longer. We know the whole offseason drama. Marcello, you were all over this thing from the beginning. So now I got to cue you up because you saw what took place against Penn State today. I think this is the hot seat getting a little too hot now for Harsin. I don't know how much longer he's going to be there.
Yeah, I was down at Auburn earlier this week. I sat down with Bryan Harsin one-on-one for a bit. The temperature there is certainly hot. The building itself, the athletics complex, is just in a strange mood right now. I mean, everybody talks like in hushed tones there because no one knows quite what the future holds, not just for the football program, for the athletics department as a whole. Alan Green, the athletics director there, an incredible athletics director in my mind, resigned because he knows that his contract's not going to be renewed in January. So he resigned a couple of weeks ago. He's the man who hired Bryan Harsin. He hired him because he was such a consistent head coach, winning 9-10 games every year at Boise State, something that they just can't do at Auburn. Auburn contends for national championships every few years, but they've only had back-to-back 10-win seasons once in its entire history. South Carolina has more. Arkansas has more in the SEC. It's insane to think that, considering the Auburn Tigers have 8 SEC titles. So the way they lost to Penn State today has got to be the most disheartening part. They were just absolutely bullied around in their own house, in the trenches. They couldn't do anything offensively. They had turnovers and bad, inopportune times. Worst loss there in 10 years since 2012 when they lost to Georgia. And this team looks a lot like that 2012 team at Auburn when they went 3-9 and winless in the SEC. They have gotten worse under Bryan Harsin. They have not gotten better. Quarterback play has gotten worse. It has not gotten better since Bo Nix left there, which is kind of incredible for me to say. And listen, sitting there and talking for Bryan Harsin for about 30 minutes, he says all the right things, that he has a vision. He doesn't really share with you exactly what that vision is, but his vision is they're just going to win. Well, you can't just say it's going to win. We're going to win, and that's what's going to happen. You got to bring in players to win. And right now, the recruiting is just dreadful and awful. A couple of days ago, they were 62nd nationally in the 24/7 Sports composite. That's 13th in the 14-team SEC, and for that matter, 15 in the 16-team SEC coming up because OU and Texas are killing it right now in recruiting. Just not any good recipe there. They're not putting any of the ingredients together correctly. Bryan Harsin very much on the hot seat. I think the only saving grace for him right now is that there's not an AD in place. They have an interim AD right now who is the compliance director. They are not going to make a move, I don't believe, and fire him in the middle of this season. I think if they do make a move, it's going to have to wait until the end of the season or right before it comes to the end of the season, before the Iron Bowl, and he has a chance to, quote-unquote, save his job, potentially with the win against Alabama. So I think the best thing for him is he doesn't honestly have a boss right now. But as soon as they get a boss there, and if they got a losing record, he's toast. I mean, he is 0-5 against the last Power 5 opponents they have faced. They have lost 5 straight games to Power 5 opponents. He's 8-8 in his head coaching career there at Auburn. And to me, if he is going to survive, he's got to have a winning season now. And he could be 4-1 still after this 5-game homestand. But the back half of that schedule, there's no Mizzou's on the back half of that schedule. There's no LSU's on the back half of the schedule. It's Georgia, at Georgia. You're at Alabama. You're facing Arkansas. Good luck, man. Because if you're not getting it done right now or even being competitive against Penn State, which I think Penn State's a top 20 team, but they're not top 10, and they're at your house and you get obliterated, not a good look. I think he's on very much thin ice. I like the guy, but it just, nothing seems to be going right there.
It's a cold world even when it's hot outside. You know, the guy is 2-1. He loses to a really good Penn State team, and everybody wants him to pack up his office today. We got to see if he can go 4-1 over the next stretch. We have to see what this guy's season is going to be like. Now, it already has not been a good fit at Auburn. We know that they wanted him gone a year ago. We know that they did everything they could do behind the scenes to cause stress and discomfort in this situation. But if I'm Bryan Harsin, what I'm doing right now is I'm just going into the locker room and I'm going into the film room and I'm trying to win football games. I'm not listening to the news. I'm not listening to message boards. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm trying to turn the telephone off except for the other phone that I have for the recruits. And I got to figure out a way to win. The bottom line is he has to win football games. If he doesn't do that, he's probably not going to be the coach at Auburn, where Auburn has some of the most unrealistic expectations in the country. They want to be Alabama, but really they're Iowa. They're really Iowa at Kentucky. They're a consistent 8-win team, but they think they're Alabama, and it's a huge disconnect in the reality of the situation at Auburn. They had the great run with Cam Newton winning the national championship. You had Gus Malzahn. You didn't like him. You ran him out of town. The people at Auburn have a real disconnect on where their place is in college football.
They say a rising tide raises all ships. It's true, even in the state of Alabama. Auburn fans won't admit that, but they've had their most successful stretch since Pat Dye was there, with Alabama having the most successful stretch in college football history, arguably, in this environment. They've been to 2 national championship games during this run by Saban. They've won 1 national title. They've won 2 SEC titles. They've been to 3 SEC championship games over this last decade plus. And yet, that's not good enough there. Still,
yeah, they fired those coaches too.
They fired those guys. Gus Malzahn had them in the top 10 all 8 years he was there. Now, they didn't finish great for most of those seasons, but he got them to that point, and that kind of spoiled the fans into thinking, okay, so what's the next step? How do we take that next step? And firing Gus Malzahn seemed to be the good idea at the time, but it's just not working out right now. And here's the other thing, Carl. You mentioned he's got to get on his other phone, his burner phone, start talking to recruits. The problem is he's talking to recruits. They ain't helping. And this was supposed to be a huge weekend for them. He kept telling me about that. We got all these big-time guys coming to campus. This is our opportunity to show them what Auburn's all about and what we're going to do here. And they just laid a complete big, fat egg on the field, and it smells rotten. I don't see any of those kids that go there and go, oh, okay, now I'll go to Auburn. Not after seeing that. I mean, I love the people at Auburn. I love the fans there. But, man, nothing's working. They better figure it out quickly in the recruiting trail, because if recruiting keeps going south the way it is this next month or so, I think that alone is probably enough to just make a change.